Namaste. Welcome to Urban Chaturati. This is Abhinav Prakash. And today I'm joined by J. Sai Deepak, who needs no introduction. He's an advocate in the Supreme Court and he has filed a petition regarding the constitutional breakdown in the West Bengal. So let's start with this topic itself. You have filed a petition or you're moving a petition in the Supreme Court regarding the killings which are happening in Bengal. There's a breakdown of law and order. And even today, we are seeing that this entire CBI drama which is happening, the chief minister has reached the CBI headquarters. Her supporters are trying to storm the headquarters of the CBI. What exactly is happening in Bengal?
I don't know. I think it's a curious mix of few circumstances. And I don't think it's just a question of what's happening in Bengal. In fact, I don't even know what's happening in Delhi for that matter. Because you see, on the 3rd of May, so 2nd of May, the results were announced. And immediately, violence was unleashed in Bengal. I don't think it was a matter of coincidence. And within a matter of 24 hours, alarming reports of gang rapes and beheadings and whatnot coming from Nanur, Birbhum, and every other place. So we were hoping that at least someone in the center would take cognizance of it and take action. And or perhaps there'd be some reactions. But except for tweets of, let's say, local leaders or people who contested in the elections, putting out SOS messages and asking for help, nothing was forthcoming in terms of concrete action. At least in the first 24 hours, I did not see anything. I could be wrong. I'm happy to be corrected on that. So on the 3rd of May, the trustees of the Indic Collective were seriously disturbed. So they put out a tweet that they would be approaching the Supreme Court. Within 24 hours, by the 4th of May, before 4:30 or so, the petition was filed. Okay. And the petition is also available on the website of the Indic Collective for people to see. From the 4th of May, Abhinav, today till the 17th of May, the petition has not been listed. Okay. At least 3 letters of urgency, well settled in accordance with the procedure of the Supreme Court, have been moved, explaining to the registry what the urgency is. We went along with even Ms. Pinky Anand, who is a senior advocate, a well-known advocate of the Supreme Court. And both of us tried to mention the matter before one of the senior benches of the court, saying that the matter needs to be listed. But we weren't even allowed to speak. The control room, muted our voices because it's a virtual hearing. Unless and until the control room of the Supreme Court unmutes you, you can't speak. That didn't happen. So again, we moved an application saying, what on earth is going on? This is not a commercial dispute. Hear us out. Still nothing. 7 Tariko, that is by the 7th, which was the last working day of the Supreme Court for the summer vacation. We again tried, nothing happened. Then we finally moved a 3rd letter of urgency saying, please list the matter at least before the vacation bench. The first vacation bench sat, I think, on the Tuesday, which is the 11th of this month. Okay. Almost close to a week now, nothing has happened. Okay. So in the meantime, what happened was, I think by the 10th or so, correct, by the 10th, which was a Monday, the Calcutta High Court had taken cognizance of a petition filed by an advocate who seems like he seems to belong to the CPIM camp, Anindya Sarkar or Anindya Das something. So this gentleman moved a writ petition before the Calcutta High Court, and taking cognizance of the petition, the Calcutta High Court constituted a constitutional bench, a 5-member bench, to look into these matters. So 7th was the Supreme Court's last working day, which was a Friday. So by Saturday, Sunday, another petition was filed through, an NGO in Bengal. This gentleman effectively runs, let's say, a women's helpline. And he was reached out to by several victims, especially women victims, who alleged molestation and worse. Okay. So by the 10th, in fact, on Monday, a petition was filed in the Calcutta High Court. It was mentioned. And the division bench of the Calcutta High Court said, in the afternoon, we have this constitution bench hearing on Monday at 2 p.m. So we will hear you along with that. Okay. Unfortunately, despite this, for some reason, for mysterious reasons, let me put it this way, our petition was not listed before the constitution bench. Okay. So despite that, we somehow managed to get access to the hearing, and we pointed out that something is going on. Earlier in the day, the division bench of this court itself had asked us to be present for the constitution bench hearing. Our petition was supposed to be listed along with this other petition, which is not being heard. So we said, perhaps this person has filed it in public interest litigation, but we have come representing the actual affected parties. We spoke of gang rapes, we spoke of vandalism, we spoke of murders, we spoke of beheadings. We spoke of people from Diamond Harbour to Birbhum forcibly asked to leave their homes. And like a jizya in Kashmir, they were being asked to pay anywhere between 25,000 to 2.5 lakhs. Or the worst part is, give up their women in return for their right to come back to their homes. Okay. Then we heard of even graver news where apparently power was being cut in certain districts, perhaps because of their skewed demography at night, and atrocities were being carried out so that lessons could be taught. In fact, Mr. Swapan Das Gupta even put out a tweet specifically saying, and there was confirmation of this, that people who were suspected of having supported the non-Trinamool parties, in particular the BJP, were identified and they were threatened, and not just threatened, they were denied access to ration in the public distribution system.
True. Okay. That I've heard here.
And with all this happening, we were wondering, the Supreme Court was not taking cognizance. Here, despite our petition being filed on behalf of affected parties, somehow the Constitution bench was not hearing. So we again moved an application before the Calcutta High Court saying this matter needs to be heard. Fortunately, on the 12th, our petition was allowed. And today, it has been directed to be listed before a special PIL bench. Okay. But I am surprised that for a matter which was filed a week ago, and for a matter that was filed more than 2 weeks ago in the Supreme Court, this is the plight of people who are actually being affected by violence. In the meantime, Navneet Kalra's matter was heard at 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. at night by the Delhi High Court. Okay. And the very same Supreme Court has previously opened its doors at midnight for a convicted terrorist. Yeah. Okay. It's surprising that a petition filed on behalf of affected parties finds no audience at all.
But what exactly is your petition to the Supreme Court?
So the petition in the Supreme Court and the petition in the High Court have been filed by two different sets of petitioners. Sorry. Since I appear as the arguing counsel and I settle the drafts, I'm in some position to tell you what was exactly put in.
Yeah.
Now, the Supreme Court petition, which was the previous petition, specifically said that, look, kindly take cognizance of the fact that the constitutional machinery of the state has broken down. Governor has put out tweet after tweet within a matter of 48 hours, specifically showing that no amount of calls from his end to the state police machinery to take action is being paid heed to. He requests the top officials of the police of State Bengal to respond and file a report. They don't respond. Then we place before the court tweets of, let's say, Aishi Ghosh, Sitaram Yechuri, the BJP, all of these people for the first time speaking in one voice, okay, saying that their cadre were being hacked to death and their properties were being destroyed and whatnot. And we said, therefore, please take cognizance of this. Second, we also said that a special bench needs to be constituted which takes cognizance of these matters, okay? Then you also constitute a special investigation team that looks into this, which is headed by perhaps a retired judge of the Supreme Court. All of this we said, but the most important thing at the end of it, which is the final prayer, was that kindly take cognizance of all these developments and come to the conclusion that the constitutional machinery within the meaning of Article 356 has broken down, and then leave it to the Honorable President to do what he deems fit. Because you see, imposition of President's rule is ultimately at his discretion and prerogative. We were merely saying that since the governor was not getting access to documents and facts to prepare a report, which is required for Article 356, and the union does not seem to be in a position to, or for whatever reason is not doing so, we are presenting material before you so that you can at least form an opinion that something is amiss, and then leave it to the president to do whatever he deems fit to do. Okay. Of course, that was, let's say, the final prayer, so to speak, to effectively shake the conscience of the court. But as far as the other prayers are concerned, everything was primarily to ask for a special investigation team, for fast-track courts, and somehow ask the state government of West Bengal to file an affidavit with respect to the steps taken by it after they came to power and what is it that they did. Because you see, the model code of conduct came to an end on 3rd of May. Okay. But murders are still going on. We still find people suddenly committing suicides. They are hanging from trees. Two people hanging from the trees. Surely they did not decide to commit mutual suicide. So what is going on? Right? So with all this going on, we had to somehow shake the conscience. So wo bhi hua, and in the High Court, what we finally said was go for arrests and ask for the state governments to explain the reasons for inaction, at least from the 3rd of May. What is it that they have done? Okay, and provide adequate compensation, and especially with respect to women who've been gang raped, multiple. Okay, some entire districts, the reports are horrible. You can't even hear the stories, especially with power being cut off at night and then people being allowed to scream so that they can terrorize their neighbors and whatnot. All of this is going on. If not in broad daylight, let's call it the darkest hour of Indian democracy. This is happening. And some people, their shops are being looted in broad daylight with the police watching as hapless spectators. If this is not breakdown of constitutional machinery, I don't know what else is. So
Yes.
These are the two different petitions.
Yeah, in fact, I think after a very long time, we are seeing this kind of mass exodus. The people are becoming refugees. And this is Bengal, and Bengal has a history of... are you there, Sai Deepak? Oh, you just froze. You are freezing.
I can hear you, but I think, let me just see, hold on.
Please.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Yeah, now I think it's better.
I'll start. Yeah, you are right. And this is after a long time we are seeing people becoming refugees within their own state. You have thousands of people who have fled Bengal. This reminds us of the genocide and the partition, which has been, which has been the very important part of Bengal's history. What's wrong with Bengal in this sense? Because I was just discussing with someone else before I recorded this podcast with you, Sai, that the radicalization in Bengal is a very old problem.
Correct.
Islamic radicalization was entirely led by the Sufis, and it's like next level radicalization, but we don't talk about it.
Correct.
So, in a historical context, let's say in a socio-political context of Bengal, why is it that Bengal is suffering so much and unable to put up any response to that?
See, there is a reason why the, let's call it Shama Prasad Mukherjee movement, so to speak, the Janasangh, it was formed in that particular state, right? It couldn't have been for any other reason. The reaction came from that state because the trigger and the cause and the action was from that particular state. Okay. Obviously, one can go back to the partition of Bengal in 1905 and then the subsequent radicalization, partly induced and subsequently how the founding, let's say, thinkers of Pakistan smelt an opportunity in creating, let's say, a specific enclave out of that particular place. And let's not forget that West Bengal today is adjacent to East Pakistan. Okay, or erstwhile East Pakistan. So there are very good reasons. But the fact remains that post-independence, while we have focused on illegal migration in Assam, the fact is two other states have borne the brunt of illegal migration along with Assam. One is Tripura and the other is West Bengal. Okay, most people don't even talk about Tripura when they speak of illegal migration, when in fact that state has borne the brunt of it. That's one of the reasons that BJP is in power in Tripura also. Okay. As far as West Bengal is concerned, at least since the 70s, there is a clear history of the left pampering illegal migrants of a specific demographic, okay, and trying to create a vote bank out of it, okay, and giving them ration cards and whatnot. In fact, the current chief minister was among the vocal voices who opposed the settlement of these illegal migrants. But ultimately, when they came to power, ultimately most people realized that they need this vote bank for them to survive. Because now you're looking at a demographic of anywhere between 27 to 30%, not all of which can be accounted by the fertility rates in Bengal of a particular community. It is artificially induced. It has been artificially increased in spite. That is the nature of this entire thing. Okay. Now that you've reached the critical figure of 27 to 30%, I think we are seeing a tipping point. Now we'll start seeing worse things. In fact, I think about 2 or 3 years ago, there were petitions in the High Court asking for the High Court to grant grant them permission to initiate what Durga processions, celebration processions, because the state government had actually banned it, because it would obviously hurt a few sentiments. Similar petitions now we see in Madras High Court, because apparently a Hanuman Jayanti procession or any other procession can't go through sensitive areas, because apparently some of these processions are called festivals and celebration of sins by a certain community. Okay, so therefore, in Bharat, the land of dharma, celebration of dharma has become celebration of sin, because a certain identity has a serious problem with it. Now, in Bengal, what has happened is, at least over the last 3.5 to 4 years, I would say that the current chief minister has mollycoddled and pampered and emboldened these interests so much that I think this was waiting to happen. It's a sad thing that the center and the party which contested so vigorously in Bengal did not anticipate this. And even if they anticipated it, I don't think they did enough to ensure that their supporters have some means of protecting themselves after the elections. Because surely it can't be anybody's case that anybody who contests an election can be absolutely sure of his victory. Okay, be it in litigation or in elections, nobody can be sure of it.
It's not that the BJP supporters who are being attacked only, even the Hindus who voted TMC are being attacked in many places.
Exactly.
It's an open thing on anyone who's a Hindu is being attacked.
So I think you have touched the right point here, which is to say that this is not just about political affiliation. The demographic, the manner in which the terror has been carried out now has acquired a clear, distinct, and irrefutable religious hue. Okay, from women being raped and being asked to chant Jai Shri Ram as they are being raped. Okay, it's almost as if these people are not living in West Bengal, they're living in Bangladesh. Okay, and in the Bangladesh of the 90s and 80s, which the Seema Muslim has spoken about in detail. Okay, this is what is happening. All of these atrocities sometimes are being committed in the presence of deities to basically give the impression, what can your deity do? We are doing this to you. This is happening. Okay, this is exactly the model that is being used in Bangladesh. Okay, with all this happening, according to me, Bangladesh is ripe for Kashmirization in another 5 to 10 years. And I wish that NRC was undertaken in this particular state with the same degree of eagerness and with the same degree of commitment as in Assam, after having rectified the mistakes of Assam. Okay, because the established racket for creating documentation for Muslim illegal migrants from Bangladesh has been in place for at least 3 decades. That's recorded history.
Yeah.
Okay. So I believe that this is one state which needs to be immediately looked into, because it's strategically placed. It's extremely strategically placed. West Bengal and Assam, for all practical purposes, if India has 2 necks, this is the other neck. Okay, if Kashmir is 1 neck, this is the other neck. And both these have become flashpoints because of their proximity to a civilizational enemy.
Yeah, but when we talk about Bengal, you see, we can blame the government, we can blame the state, but let's say the state in India has always been more or less non-existent for the people. We're seeing in the case of pandemic as well, when we needed them, the state simply melted away. But why is the Hindu society of Bengal not able to fight back? And this is a century-long thing. We are not seeing it. I mean, we are not seeing that assertion. Bengalis underwent partition. Then in the 50s, there were massive massacres of the Bengali Hindus in the eastern Pakistan. It has been happening ever since. Then the 70s was the largest genocide after the World War II. Mostly the Hindus were killed. And then you are having repeated incidents of bullying, threatening, and now an open violence again. What's wrong? What's wrong socially that there is no coherent response, even for their own survival? And you see that a large number of people, at least on social media from Bengal, they're living in self-denial.
So, Abhinav, see, this is where I think perhaps I may have a slightly different point of view from quite a few people on this side of the ideological spectrum. Because you see, for BJP to come back to power, even in a state like Uttar Pradesh, which is supposed to be the Hindi heartland and the base of the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, took a lot of time. In between, you had the Mayavatis and the Mulayam Yadavs and Akhilesh Yadavs ruling the roost. That happened in Uttar Pradesh. Before they could actually forge an alliance with Nitish Kumar, it was effectively Lalu Raj, Jungle Raj in Bihar as well. Right? Now, in Bengal, the fact of the matter is, even in such hostile circumstances, with a clear demographic inversion underway, for the BJP to have managed to, let's say, come about with 77 seats is a fantastic outcome, no matter how much we downplay it. Okay? Maybe because we anticipated a sweep, it feels like a debacle. But according to me, for them to come to 77, the credit for this goes to the Bengalis and specifically the Hindu Bengalis who managed to chant Jai Shri Ram in front of Mamata Banerjee over and over again, risking their life and limb. So I would say that the Hindu Bengali has not let down the state and in fact has done his utmost. Unfortunately, I believe that people who plan these elections and their campaigns and the choice of leaders have a lot to look into. Since I'm not an expert on the particular subject, I will not comment beyond that. But at the very least, from what I understand, a figure of 120 was being looked at. Okay. From 120 to 77, what happened? Anything over 120, according to me, would have been a bonus. But if this crucial 40-50 seats couldn't be garnered, then there is something amiss. It's easy to blame the electorate, but you have to understand that they need to be able to connect to some of your issues. And they also need to know when they live in such a hostile atmosphere that they're being presented with a very strong face. The person who's been appointed as the leader of opposition in Bengal was not presented as the chief ministerial candidate. Okay, these are real aspects. Okay, so I don't think there is anything particularly wrong with the Hindus of Bengal. At least certainly not anything more wrong than people in Uttar Pradesh or any other place. Because after decades of left rule and at least a decade of Mamata Banerjee's rule, they've managed to come with 77 seats for a mainstream party, which has still not been able to completely, let's say, do away with its North Indian tax to some extent in certain places. Okay, they've managed to do that. Now, if we have to look at certain aspects, I would say the intellectual institutions in West Bengal have been dominated by the left and they continue to be dominated by the left. And as long as history is not presented in its stark nakedness, people will always believe in a sugar-coated version of it. Okay? And therefore, when you don't tell the people of Bengal, this is exactly what happened with you in 1905. This is what happened with you in August 1946. This again happened with your people in 1971. And therefore, please be aware of it. When you don't tell them, I'm sorry, a population is bound to lose it. And especially in Bharat, I would say we have a fantastic short memory, civilizationally speaking. Okay, we are blessed with that kind of civilizational amnesia, which I don't think any other community has been blessed with. Okay, and therefore, in the 7 years that, let's say, a certain dispensation has been in power, I would go back to asking, fair enough, let's understand that perhaps the dice is loaded against you in certain states. What is it that you could have done in terms of changing history curricula so that you memorialize certain historical events so that people draw the right lessons from it? Where do Noakhali or let's say the partition or the actual reasons for the partition figure in our history books? They don't.
Yes.
They have never. You can give this excuse in the first term. You can't give this excuse in the second term when you're halfway during your second term. Okay. So I would always, as a person who introspects whenever something goes wrong, I'd ask, what is it that was within my power that I could have done, which I have not done? Have I made the best use of the cards which have been dealt to me on a given table? If the answer is a no, then the first person at whose doors the blame must be laid is myself and then everybody else. Okay. So I wouldn't want to blame an indeterminate mass of Hindus after they've given you 77 seats.
Yeah.
The credit goes to them. And any day, I would give this another example. When people said that Kerala is gone and Kerala Hindus seem to have voted these people back to power and all that, why did they vote these people back to power, the left? Because they taught them a lesson in 2019 after Sabarimala. Okay. And when the left decided to make amends, and the left cadre effectively told the party itself that for us, Ayyappa is more important because our relatives are people who believe in Ayyappa. Therefore, we will have to sacrifice some of our ideological positions at the altar of Ayyappa. That's the position that they took. Okay.
In fact, the CPM in Kerala is the Hindu party in a sense.
Exactly.
Right.
And if you ask anyone in Kerala who they think is the Hindu party, they will always say that Congress is the Hindu party in the state of Kerala, not even the LDF, because you see, the Congress has a very strong Nair support base in Kerala. Okay, that's one of the strongest vote banks of the Congress in Kerala. And that particular group has been responsible for protecting, let's say, Hindu interests in certain places. So what may be true at the national level may not be true at the state level because of its peculiar history. Okay. So when suddenly another party comes and says that we are the Hindu party and we will represent your interests, they have the added burden of proving their bona fides with respect to the Hindu interest even more, because there is already someone who's seen as the protector of the Hindu interest. Okay.
So is it the same case with the TMC? The TMC for so long was looked as a Hindu party, and now because of electoral compulsions, it has completely betrayed the Hindus?
See, at the very least, TMC was seen as let's say, the anti-left option. Okay. Now, whether that translates to a Hindu party in a state of Bengal, I don't know.
Even I don't think so. I'm asking an hypothetical question.
I don't think so because you see, people to a significant extent perhaps have not woken up to the demographic inversion that has been induced in the state. Okay. And she made it a point to talk about immigrants to a certain point, but I don't remember that figuring largely in a speech to the run-up to the elections in the last term. Okay, that did not happen. Okay. So perhaps the true Hindu option was really the BJP, which is why no other opposition has managed to come anywhere close to the BJP. Okay. Perhaps if they had gotten a few more things right, again, I leave it to the experts, at the very least, they would have crossed the 100 mark. That would have been, according to me, a fantastic, let's say, outcome compared to the current outcome.
Even I was expecting 100 around, something like that, because of the feedback I was getting, 77 was a bit of a shock.
Right. It was certainly a bit of a shock.
But, coming to another point, so what is happening in Bengal is not new. I'm from UP. It keeps on happening in UP, which is supposedly more, politically Hindutva kind of a state.
Right.
These low-level aggressions are very common in UP, disruptions of festival and everything. I mean, after Yogi, the things have gone down a bit, but it is very common still. Same is the case in Tamil Nadu. They are forcing a festival to stop. Same is the case in Bengal. Kashmir, anyways, we can't. No point in discussing that.
Correct.
What's happening? Why we are losing the ability to fight back? I mean, if you go back before the partition, the small Hindu communities which are living in the northwestern frontier, they would stand up and fight back.
Correct.
Right? They would, in the 1800s, you can see that they will hit back. If it is an insult, they will give double the amount of insult.
Right.
But why? And they were in absolute minority by that time, but they were doing that. Why
Right.
we are not able to do that now?
See, in fact, we don't even need to go that far back in history. The survival of a Hindu population in current day Pakistan is because those people still managed to hold on to their identities and the faith of their ancestors and their religious places. Okay. Now, here's one thing. The reason why these people have managed to survive despite being outnumbered is because they know हमारे लिए तो बचाने वाला यहाँ पे कोई है नहीं. Okay, हमें अपने आप की रक्षा करनी पड़ेगी. That's it. Okay, they know that the only source of help is going to come from them. Okay, if let's say the Hindus of India realize this, I think the situation would be vastly different and better. Okay, unfortunately, Hindus in India, I think, are under the impression that there is someone who will take action, that there is a cultural organization that will protect their interests and there is a political organization that will protect their interests. Okay. And in the process, they have told themselves, हमें सिर्फ 5 साल में एक बार कमल पे दबाना है बटन और कुछ नहीं करना है. Okay. That's been their position. I think they've effectively come to that conclusion. Now, I don't know whether the organization has told them this, because when you ask them, they say, we never said we are a Hindu party. They're very clear about that. Okay. And we never said that we represent only the interests of one particular. राम जन्मभूमि में participate किया तो क्या हो गया? इसका मतलब ये थोड़ी होगा कि हम हिंदू पार्टी हैं. कोई भी हो सकता है. Because everybody will start talking of Ram as the Himame Ind and all that. No? So now they'll take a different position altogether. They were doing it because they didn't believe that Ram was a Hindu. They thought that Ram was Imam-e Hind. Okay. And now when you ask them about Mathura and Kashi, नहीं, हमने तो सिर्फ राम जन्मभूमि के बारे में कहा था. हमने मथुरा और काशी के बारे में नहीं कहा था. So that position keeps changing every 2 months depending on which way the wind is blowing. Anyways, छोड़ देते हैं उस बात को. My point is, in light of this, Hindus, according to me, have surrendered their civilizational future and their personal futures at the altar of a political vision. Okay? Instead of it being the other way around. Okay? So assume for a moment that today the United States government chooses to adopt a policy where it turns a blind eye to any atrocities committed in places like Michigan, where there's a huge Muslim demographic, the Arab demographic and all that. If atrocities are being committed against, let's say, the non-Muslims, one, they have access to weapons thanks to their right to bear arms. Okay. And they have still managed to protect their institutions. So the institutions, along with the right to bear weapons, will effectively come out in their self-defense. Because they'll say, you were supposed to protect us. You were busy looking the other way and pampering a certain vote bank. We will have to defend ourselves. So you can go. You can take a hike. Okay. Are the Hindus of this country in a position to do this? No, they are not. Please go to Nepal. And if you go to Nepal, despite the communist revolution, the average Nepali Hindu will tell you, we wear our Hindu identities with greater pride and confidence than the Hindus of India. You'll be told on your faces this. Okay. Average Hindu, you're not looking at someone who's connected to an aristocratic family, some Shah or Rana. No. The average Nepali will tell you this. हम भारत के तरह नहीं हैं. They don't even say India. आपका भारत तो इंडिया बन गया, but हम नेपाल हैं. हम अपने आप को देख लेंगे. That's what they say openly. Why? Because you have surrendered your basic right from institutional protection to, let's say, any other form of protection. Compared to other communities, you have surrendered it quickly. Because you have to remember, politics ultimately is a game of convenience, and it is no more a game of ideology, notwithstanding anybody's ideological proclivities. They're effectively meant only to differentiate you at the time of elections. But after elections, almost everyone is proven to be the same on certain critical aspects, particularly on the cultural aspects. So I would say, ensure that you continue to, let's say, vote for people who claim to fight for your interests. But don't stop at that. You have to go much beyond that. And if anything, the last 7 years has proven that when it comes to the current situation, you are an orphan community. आपके साधुओं को उत्तर प्रदेश में भी मारा जा सकता है. हर हफ्ते उनका गला काटा जा सकता है. गौ हत्या तो आराम से चलता रहेगा. Okay, it doesn't make a difference. चाहे वो उत्तर प्रदेश हो या बंगाल हो या केरला हो या कश्मीर हो, गौ कहीं पे भी सेफ नहीं है. जहां पे गौ सेफ नहीं है, वहां पे हिंदू सेफ नहीं है. It's become the simple, straightforward analogy. Now, if that is the case, if no difference has effectively come about, then you're left with no other option but to ask yourself, fine, now what is the next step? The next step is institutional autonomy, institutional protection. All your organizations which could have protected you on the streets have been defanged in the hope that one organization will protect you. But that organization has effectively chosen not to do so. So there's a fantastic example that was given that when, let's say, genocides were going on in Africa in the name of religion, the entire world was under the impression that America would step in and do something. Okay. Then they finally said, at least आप बता दो आप कुछ करेंगे कि नहीं करेंगे. Then we'll take care of it. Okay. Now here we are in a similar situation. आप बता दो आप हमारी रक्षा करेंगे या हम अपनी रक्षा खुद करें. Because you see, it's no more a question of civilization hovering at 60,000 feet. जो बंगाल में हो सकता है ये कहीं पे भी हो सकता है. And you just saw a video of Akhilesh Yadav saying, जो बंगाल में हुआ था वो यहाँ पे भी होगा. So the next election 2021, this is exactly the modus operandi that's going to be used by regional parties and oppositions against people who support the BJP. So let's not be under the impression that Bengal was an aberration. According to me, Bengal is the beginning of a norm. And if people realize that, they would stop focusing on the war between the center and the state on the CBI and whatever nonsense that's going on and ask themselves, ground mein logon ke sath kya ho raha hai? Because now the CBI thing has completely diverted attention from the poll violence. Okay. People no more talk about it.
Agreed.
Previously, for 1 week, we were occupied with Palestine and Israel. Fantastic. You support
what
people.
Nonsense. Seriously.
यहाँ पे बैठ के कुछ लोग पैलेस्टीन को सपोर्ट करेंगे, यहाँ पे बैठ के कुछ लोग इजराइल को सपोर्ट करेंगे, लेकिन यहाँ पे बैठ के बंगालियों को सपोर्ट नहीं करेंगे.
There's a difference. The people who are supporting Palestine, they may actually go and fight. They actually go and join ISIS as well.
Exactly. They will walk the talk. They will walk the talk. They will export brides and they will also export people to support the movement that they believe in. But we will continue to support everybody in the hope that हमारी तो कोई तो कुछ सुन लेगा. अरे आपके लोग यहाँ पे नहीं सुन रहे हैं, बाहर वाला क्यों सुनेगा आपको? You should hope that it doesn't come to a point where Hindus have to go and seek asylum in Israel.
we hope that. But yeah, you are right. And I have said that, that Indian politics is kind of back in the 1920s. It's the same kind of language, same kind of discourse, same actors, people standing on the street and making all kinds of speeches, and then the Hindu leaders and Hindu intellectuals going and whitewashing it. Exactly the same politics of the 1920s. I hope we realize the danger. Perhaps the history will take a better turn this time. But Sai Deepak, thank you for coming to the show and talking to us. We know you're very busy. You had just limited time, but hoping to see you soon again.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I just hope that the party in power doesn't do the same mistake as the party in 1920.
We all hope that. And thank you, audience, for listening to us. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and also join as a member if you like. Hoping to see you soon. Thank you.